Brave Proof shares much in common with the likes of Alundra and the early Zelda games by presenting an action RPG that sees you taking up the role of a hero who sets out to save the girl he loves. Now, the story is nothing to write home about and admittedly takes a backseat to the incredible gameplay that's on offer. At its core, it's all about mazes. The whole thing is a giant labyrinth with a range of puzzles that connect all of the areas together. You'll find yourself exploring the depths of dungeons to the more serene countryside as you attempt to achieve your goals. Of course, it's not just about puzzles and exploration. Fighting manages to play a huge part in the game as well, and thankfully there's many ways for the player to take on enemies. The main one being your sword, which allows you to carry out a series of combos, and throughout the adventure you'll get to upgrade this weapon and also learn a selection of special abilities that can all be chained and combined together to create an insane amount of combinations. Now, it wasn't always available here in the West and never actually officially arrived. It stayed put in Japan for so many years, but luckily a fan translation has got you covered. But in all honesty, it can still be enjoyed without it, as there's not too much of a reliance upon text. If you're a Zelda fan or are looking to try out a new action RPG, Brave Proof provides a competent experience that is bound to leave you with a smile on your face. The PlayStation 1 isn't well known for its wealth of first-person shooters, but there are a couple of note, especially Hammerhead's Shadow Master. The player jumps into a futuristic and heavily armed ATV to stand as the main resistance against the enemy. As you would expect, you've got a wide assortment of options when it comes to doing so, from standard lasers to rocket launchers and railguns, that makes juggling between all of them a central strategy to overcoming everything that's thrown your way. Now, the game is split up into levels, with 16 in total that span 7 different worlds. Each of them require the player to complete a series of objectives before moving on to the next. The level design is relatively straightforward, with lots of simple maze-like maps, but unfortunately the areas you must traverse with your hulking buggy are all too often narrow and confining, making navigation a bit of a mixed bag, but it doesn't completely ruin the game. Now, visually, there's no question that Shadow Master uses a breathtaking graphics engine. Taking full advantage of the 3D hardware, Shadow Master presents you with an unbelievable array of fancy explosions and creative animations. It makes good use of lens flare, alpha blending and transparency to present a truly impressive look, which is somewhat similar to G-Police. Sure, it's not as impressive by today's standards, but it was still a big achievement. With its fast-paced action and engaging gameplay, Shadow Master is well worth giving a go. Shaolin is a 3D fighter with several RPG elements thrown in, which help it stand out amongst the sea of incredible fighters that released on the PlayStation 1. It sees you taking on the role of a martial arts student as you train and travel, visiting different temples and beating the crap out of their students. But what makes it unique is that you actually follow the entire life of your character. When you start out, you are 10 years old, and over the course of the game your knowledge and body grows until you reach the end of your life. I absolutely loved this aspect of the game, and with several characters to go through the adventure with as well, the replayability is completely off the charts. Now, when it comes to the actual gameplay, it's mainly split up into 2 separate styles. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the free roaming aspects that see you getting to know the surprisingly diverse cast of NPCs, which all help the game world feel like a believable space. You'll also find yourself buying items and earning a range of costumes for your character, from panda suits to sailor costumes. Secondly, we have the fighting itself, which is thankfully just as enjoyable as it is varied. There's 6 different styles to choose from. You've got Kung Fu, Taekwondo and Tai Chi to name a few, which all offer unique ways to take on the enemies. There's a bunch of combos, stances, counters, acrobatics, juggles and strategy, which make each encounter an exciting ordeal, and as you progress you'll unlock even more moves to add to your resume. What helps mix up the gameplay even further is that these fights aren't always one-on-one. There's many instances throughout the game where you'll have to deal with a whole group of enemies at once, and it's here where your knowledge of the mechanics in play will truly be tested. Sure, it's not as deep as some of its contemporaries such as Tekken or Bloody Roar for example, but it is enjoyable and presents enough of a challenge and plenty of options for those who want to dive deeper. Nanotech Warrior is a shooter like no other. It's both innovative and fast, with various ideas that admittedly never quite hit the ground running, but after some time become a huge part of what makes it such a solid game. Like most shooters, you can expect to be dodging obstacles and taking on a variety of enemies, with a huge arsenal of weapons by your side. But what makes it a bit different is the inclusion of a jump mechanic. You see, each of the levels present a playing field, which is essentially a tube. The player doesn't only have to avoid obstacles by steering the ship, but by clearing them completely thanks to the jump. At first it can be a bit tricky to get used to, but there's a nice learning curve where each run slowly eases you into having to overcome an ever-increasing amount of hurdles, right up to the point where it becomes second nature. As I mentioned earlier, a whole suite of offensive options also play a huge role, from standard lasers to the more impressive rockets and power-ups that litter each stage. Of course, the enemies are just as well equipped, so really digging into the systems in play is key to overcoming some of the more challenging moments in the game. But if there is one area where Nanotech Warrior really shines, it has to be its presentation. The sheer speed at which the game runs is incredible, and thankfully the detail more than matches, with your ship and each and every enemy receiving an equal amount of attention. Unfortunately though, the game is just too damn short and doesn't offer much in the ways of replayability, but that doesn't take away from everything that Nanotech Warrior gets right. The Fist of the North Star has received many game adaptations over the years, but one you don't hear much about is the 3D brawler on the PS1. Without a doubt, the game is true to the source material and is very fun to play. The basic stages will see you watching a very long cutscene from the anime, and then entering into battle against a gang of thugs and eventually a boss. Fighting the swarms of enemies is exhilarating, but after a while it can become a bit repetitive. This is mainly because the fighting system is not that deep, so you'll be using the same moves over and over to dispatch your foes. A neat twist though is that some enemies are coloured red, meaning at points in battle they will briefly flash white. If you connect with an attack at that moment, you'll be taken to a Dance Dance Revolution style minigame where you must quickly input the commands shown on the screen. If you do so, you'll be rewarded by vanquishing your opponent in an especially bloody manner. And man, does the blood flow in this game. What helps push Fist of the North even further are the incredible boss fights, which more than make up for the monotony of the regular enemies. Each of them are taken from the anime and require a lot of patience to defeat. To round it off, there's a decent multiplayer mode included as well that allows you to play through the campaign with a friend, and it's here where the game really begins to shine, even going as far as allowing you to play as the bosses as you progress further. Even though there are several better beat-em-ups on the PlayStation 1, Fist of the North Star is still a solid game and will likely satisfy fans of the anime, as well as offer something for fans of the genre to enjoy. Future Cop LAPD takes place towards the end of the century in the 2090s. Los Angeles has become a corrupted city, a place of high crime, and strict law enforcement is needed to keep it under control. That's where the improved LAPD comes in. You control their best weapon in the fight against crime, the X1 Alpha. This machine is a police car that can transform into a gun-wielding, missile-launching, crime-fighting robot, but you won't be using it to catch criminals. You'll be using it to deal out complete and total destruction. Now the game can be played with 1 or 2 players in the standard story mode, which sees you going from mission to mission and carrying out a series of objectives as you normally would, with a wide selection of weaponry at your fingertips, from machine guns to rockets and lasers, which all have a role to play with a variety of enemies that come your way. From the minute-to-minute opponents to the more extravagant bosses, there's a solid sense of difficulty as you make your way through the game. And in addition to the story mode, there's something known as Precinct Assault included as well, which sees up to 2 players going head to head. The best thing about it is if you have no one to play with, the computer can step in and still offer a pretty decent amount of challenge. Now when it comes to graphics, I'm not gonna lie, Future Cop LAPD is a bit underwhelming. Although there are many different camera perspectives you can utilise, the overall playing field can be difficult to look at. Thankfully it doesn't impact the gameplay one bit, it's here where the true value of the game really lies. When it comes to replay value, it's pretty bare bones as well, and doesn't offer much more than the modes I've already mentioned, but there's enough there to warrant playing it several times, especially the highly enjoyable Precinct Assault. If you're looking for something easy to pick up and play, Future Cop LAPD would make a welcome addition to your library. Roll cage fits into the popular genre of destructive racing, but one of the differences between it and all of the others in this genre is that roll cage has no damage. The vehicles can withstand any accident or attack without ever actually getting destroyed, so depending on how good you are, a race tends to be complete chaos from start to finish. Now it all takes place on 2 planets, Earth and Outworld. Altogether there are 15 tracks set across these worlds with 4 variations that play out across the main league mode. Naturally it sees you having to complete a series of races, but a nice inclusion is that simply coming first is not the only thing that contributes to your success. High scores are your main objective in the game, and if you see someone climbing up in the ranks, all you have to do is delay that race's progress in the next race. There's many ways to do this as well. Aside from the speedy racing, to truly master the game you will need to use the weapons to their full extent. It gives you every tool to hinder your opponents and help you up. They range from rockets to wormholes to the extremely odd but cool time warp. But your best tool for destruction and mayhem is your auto-targeting missile, which can lock on to many of the tall buildings and signs that litter the track, and as the monstrous objects crash into the ground it sends out a shockwave. This not only boosts your car to twice its normal speed, but also crushes the competition on your trail. Now graphically, Roll Cage looks amazing. There is no other way to put it. This game is one of only a handful of races that convey an excellent sense of speed. Scenery blazes by and the frame rate never takes a hit, even with explosions and rival cars spread across the screen. Roll Cage is a fantastic experience, which in my eyes makes it one of the best racing games on the system. Kagero Deception 2 managed to bring true innovation to the third-person action-adventure genre. Unlike virtually every action game out there, you have absolutely no direct offensive moves. Instead of fighting with your weapons or physical skills, you create, place and set off deadly traps to dispatch your enemies. From rolling boulders to bear traps to poisonous gas, there are over 40 traps to make and use, which can all then be placed on the floor, walls and ceiling in the many rooms in the game environment. On the surface, it doesn't seem that there's much of a challenge when it comes to actually playing, but like I mentioned, you have no physical abilities at your disposal. As a result, you must run away from your opponents and avoid their varied melee and long-range attacks. Ideally, as they chase you, they'll run right into the traps that you've set up, so you need to be prepared in advance, both to give your traps time to charge up and to get into a position where you can witness your opponent move into it. Visually, Kagero suffers from problems common to many PS1 games. It is heavily polygon based, so there's lots of jaggies, pop-ins, and the ability to see through walls from the right angle, but there's nothing bad enough to distract from the fine gameplay. On the other hand, I feel that the environment design is rather boring, offering large, featureless, blocky rooms at times, all done on a grey, heavy palette. Gloomy is one thing as it fits the mood of the game, but sparse and empty is another. Regardless of these flaws, when it comes to gameplay, Kagero will not disappoint. When it comes to fighting games, the PlayStation played host to many memorable experiences like Soul Blade and Dead or Alive, but as with many consoles, there's always a select few games that fall into obscurity, and Evil Zone is one of them. The gameplay is simple and only consists of 2 buttons. That's all you have to use, just the triangle button in any direction, and that alone gives you enough attacks to pound your opponent into oblivion, with the distance between you and your enemy adding even more variety to your attacks. On top of that, even using the guard button with a direction can help you quickly maneuver around your opponent. Although the general narrative doesn't appear to have much substance, it's the individual stories of the characters that are interesting. Each of them play out like a 10-episode anime miniseries, complete with episode previews and title screens. Even though each character is trying to accomplish the same goal, their reasons for doing so and the way they encounter and react around the other characters changes with every story. Graphically, Evil Zone is a bit of a mixed bag. The characters themselves look great, with each of the fighters' special attacks being unique to the user. Whenever you pull off a special attack, the camera switches to multiple dynamic angles that gives you a truly cinematic view. It adds a real amount of depth to each fight, but unfortunately the same cannot be said for the locations themselves. They're all completely flat with simple 2D bitmaps as the backgrounds, but of course this doesn't impact gameplay one bit, and once the action heats up you'll be lost in the fireworks anyway. Although it never quite reaches the heights of other fighters on the system, Evil Zone is still a game that's definitely still worth picking up. When it comes to RPGs, the PlayStation was an absolute goldmine. From the likes of Final Fantasy to more obscure options like Legend of Dragoon, there was plenty to get stuck into. But one that hit well below the radar has to be Vagrant Story. Its narrative is a masterpiece and is at the core of the entire adventure. It sees you filling the role of Ashley, who was ordered to apprehend a dangerous felon and the leader of a cult. However, after meeting him, everything changes. I won't go into too much detail about the story as I don't want to spoil a single aspect of it, so instead I'll move on to the gameplay. Now, one of the most controversial aspects and the most off-putting to many gamers is the combat system. Many find it tedious and overly complex, and I can understand that point of view. To me though, Vagrant Story's mechanics represent the ultimate example of you get out what you put in. The first time I played this game, I blundered around doing zero damage to most bosses and not fully understanding classes, affinities, types or combining items. If you master these principles though, you'll find the game considerably less difficult, although still often challenging. In terms of graphical fidelity, Vagrant Story's visuals push the original PlayStation to its limits. It has one of the highest polygon counts of any PlayStation game, and its animations are outstandingly smooth and fluid. Complementing this is the great variety of locations that fully showcase the dark city of Leamonde. The game takes you from the underground dankness of the wine cellars and catacombs through the eerily quiet city itself, with many other vivid locations along the way. All things considered, I highly recommend Vagrant Story, especially to RPG fans and those who enjoy outstanding plots and character development. Even if you're not in the above category, give this game a try, you might just be pleasantly surprised. Well, that does it for another video. Keep an eye out for part 2 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date, and also join our growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Quinn, Dio, Alex and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.